The Anacostia River is one of the most polluted rivers in America, but the Anacostia is like a buried treasure. Cleaned up, its natural beauty systems will enrich us all. Fortunately, scientists, environmentalists, and citizens, including youth, are working hard to unlock the magic of the Anacostia River. We are DC Public School 5th graders bringing video cameras and our voice to the battle to save the Anacostia River. Please join us for Anacostia Explorers.
How are we feeling?
Feeling good.
Feeling good? Can anybody tell me where we are today? The Earth Conservation Corps' Matthew Henson Center. He was the first black man to reach the North Pole. Right. Who did he travel with? Does anybody know? Yes, ma'am.
Admiral Perry.
Yes, Admiral Perry and Matthew Henson were the first North Americans to set foot at the North Pole. Who knows where Matthew Henson was from?
He was from Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. He's from right here in this neighborhood. We're going to retrace some of the steps of Matthew Henson. We're going to sort of go on a journey looking for Matthew, or the remnants of Matthew, in today's Washington, D.C. Matthew Henson was a great explorer. He was a natural-born explorer. He was a self-taught scientist. Matthew Henson was the sort of man who was able to develop skill sets necessary to handle any job he encountered, right? So Matthew Henson was a great navigator. He used the tools of the day. He used the sextant, he used the stars, he used the sun and the heavens. We've got modern technology that is a lot more sophisticated than that. Who knows what this is?
A GPS.
GPS device. This device is able to communicate with satellites, and it's able to bounce information back and forth between the two, and so you can get an exact reading of where you are on the planet based on latitude and longitudinal coordinates.
All right, here we go. So we got our coordinates. So you go ahead and write down the coordinates.
This is phenomenal technology that wasn't even thought of at the time of Matthew Henson's explorations. But we have access to this phenomenal technology, so we're going to use some of this in our explorations today. So, you guys, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Oh, come on, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
All right then, let's go. Come on. This is the spot where the furrier shop used to stand. The address was 1237. That address doesn't even exist anymore. This is where Matthew Henson met Admiral Perry. In 1885, Henson had already become a navigator. He had become a sailor. He had been other places in the world. And he was working here at Steinmetz & Son Furriers when Perry came in off of an expedition to store some of his gear. That's where the two men met, right here, and that's where their friendship began. And then for the next 20 years, Perry spent time with Henson all over the world. Let's go inside, okay, and see if there's anybody here who knows the significance of the place where we're standing, okay?
All right, let's go.
All right, here we go. Hi. Are you the manager, sir? Fine. Are you the manager?
Yes.
Yes? Hi, I'm LeVar Burton, and these are students from River Terrace Elementary School, and we are plotting the trail of Matthew Henson. Do you know, Dave, the significance of the building that we're standing in here?
No, I don't.
You don't know the history of this location?
I have no idea.
This used to be 1237 Pennsylvania Avenue, and this was Steinmetz & Son, the furrier that Matthew Henson worked at. When he met Admiral Perry, that's where their friendship began, and their lifelong explorations together actually began right here in this location. Where this CVS stands today, Matthew Henson used to work here. Matthew Henson was one of the first people to actually be at the North Pole. He was a member of Admiral Perry's expedition. He was a black man right from here in Washington, D.C., and he was the reason Perry got to the North Pole. Yeah.
So you're doing a tour around?
We're doing a tour of Washington, D.C. area. We're on the trail of Matthew Henson. We're discovering places that he lived and walked and worked.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
So now you know that part of the story, Dave.
I sure do.
Yeah.
Thank you very
So
much.
spread the good word.
I will.
Okay.
Great word, great word.
While a group of us visited the original location of the furrier shop, another group was in southern Maryland visiting the historic birthplace of Matthew Henson.
All right, I want to welcome you to Charles County. This is the county in which Matthew Henson was born. All of the evidence is that he was born at this place that we're going to visit today. Here we are in Washington, D.C. You all left here this morning, and you came down, and you met me down here, and we are now right about a little place called Nanjemoy. Right about in that, where that dot.
We marked our location on our maps
That's where we are right now.
and charted our coordinates using the GPS device.
We're going to walk back here. It's less than a city block. I can show you where an old house stood. And there's a remains of a well there where they got their water. And this is a house site that has been abandoned for nearly 100 years. This is all that's left of it. Every house had to have a chimney. And these are bricks. These are bricks left over from the old chimney of the house.
How do you know that the house was here?
Well, it comes through word of mouth, through people. I'm 81 years old, and the man that told me about this was 103 years old, so you get stories that are repeated from. It wasn't written in history books, because at the time Matthew Henson was a little boy, no one knew that he was going to be a successful explorer. The history of his success didn't come back until years after he'd left this area. And now we are trying to rebuild the history of his life. You're standing on the spot that started that whole scenario. You are now standing on the spot where we are almost sure that this was his birthplace in this simple little house that stood here many years ago.
Now we're at National Geographic. Can you point it out on the map for me? Go ahead and mark it.
Yes.
Here we go.
There you go.
Our closest location, north 54.254 with W 077 02.139. We have it.
Okay. So now, let's go inside.
Once inside, we were amazed at all of the cool exhibits we saw and got to touch. While in the archives, we got to see actual pictures of Matthew Henson taken during this expedition to the North Pole.
We are down at the secret archive, so be very secret about this, okay?
One of many of the albums
Wow,
that we have
look at that.
from the Perry collection. We have about 34 albums like this, about 6,500 prints.
Really? You've seen this picture before, right? You know what I love about this picture? Is that this looks like it could have been taken yesterday to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, look at him, he's wearing the sunglasses, even his hairstyle. I mean, this looks like it could have been taken just yesterday. And we know that this was taken at least
About 100 years
about
ago.
100 years ago.
Yeah.
This picture is about 100 years old, and it doesn't look like 100 years ago at all. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Excuse me. How y'all get these pictures?
Well, National Geographic assisted in sponsoring the expedition. So
An expedition is a journey made for a specific purpose.
Nice to meet you, sweetheart.
My name is Shani.
Nice to meet you.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Of course I do.
Would you ever like to go to the North Pole?
No. No. I wouldn't like to go because it's too cold. No.
What was it like to receive the Hubbard Medal?
It was quite an experience. I'm so happy that I was living long enough. I lived long enough to receive it in Uncle Matt's honor.
We're fortunate to have the closest living relative to Matthew Henson, a native of Washington, D.C., here with us today to receive the Hubbard Medal for Matthew Henson. So if I may ask Mrs. Audrey Mabane to come up to the podium. This is the Hubbard Medal.
This is the Hubbard Medal.
Ms. B-Rain, what do you want everybody to remember about your uncle?
What I would like for everyone to remember that Uncle Matt was able and lived long enough to go to the pole and be honored as the first black to have been there. I'm sorry that that it took so long, but they made it.
We're at Mount Hope Baptist Church in Nanjemoy, and this is the known burial spot for Matthew Henson's mother. I met here with the director, the deacons of this church, and they said this is the oldest part of the burial ground, and that somewhere along here they think Mrs. Matthew Henson's mother. Her maiden name was Gaines before she married Henson, and she was buried in a grave here, but they don't know just where her grave is. They know it's in this area of the graveyard. So I'm glad you can now go back and tell your fellow students that you visited Matthew Henson's birthplace. It's been identified by many people as the place where he was born. He is honored throughout much in New York and in Washington. If you've had a chance to go to the National Cemetery at Arlington, he's buried there. His remains were moved from New York and reburied at the Arlington National Cemetery.
Quite a headstone, isn't it? It's pretty impressive. So as Matthew Henson was an explorer, and he was an expert at navigating and mapping, let's mark this spot, right? Let's plot it in the explorer tradition.
Here we go. All right. North 38, 52, 239, 18.
So if Matthew Henson were here today, is there anything that you guys would like to say to him?
I would ask him how his journey to the North Pole.
How his journey to the North Pole was? What would you like to know about his journey?
I wanted to know if one of his fingers fell off from frostbite.
Did you hear that story? Was there a story that Henson lost a finger due to frostbite?
I would ask him how did it feel when he reached the North Pole.
How did it feel? Wouldn't that be a nice thing to know, how he felt when he reached the North Pole? You know what I want to know? I would want to know how he felt not getting the recognition that he knew he deserved. I mean, everybody has a sense of when something is unfair, and that's a huge example of just how unfair the world can be. How important do you think the native Inuits were to the expedition?
I don't think they would have made it without him.
You don't think so? Why not?
Because they provided like the dogs,
Mm-hmm.
the coats.
Mm-hmm. The know-how, the technology that they needed for survival, all of that information came from the Inuit people.
They lived there.
They lived there. So before we leave this spot, let's do one last thing, okay? Let's just take a few steps over and take a look at Mr. Perry's grave, shall we? What's the first thing you notice about this tombstone? The globe, right. The sort of the symbol of Perry's life as an explorer. Who knows what the star represents? The North Pole. Exactly right. You know what else is interesting about these tombstones is if you look at the tombstones in Arlington National Cemetery, most of them, they're very small. These are two huge grave markers, which in some ways is an indication of the importance that these men played in the history of this country. So it's really interesting that one of the largest tombstones in Arlington National Cemetery actually belongs to Matthew Henson. These are the words that are on Henson's tombstone. The lure of the Arctic is tugging at my heart. To me, the trail is calling, the old trail, the trail that is always new. So from an explorer's point of view, and Matthew Henson, at the very center of his being, was an explorer. He was an explorer at heart. Even here at his final resting place, he's talking about the call of the trail, the call of the explorer's life. I mean, this man lived his dream. He walked his talk. He actually had an intense desire to be out there in the world at the edge of experience, pushing the envelope, and he lived his life that way, and it's reflected in everything he did, including his tombstone. What's the most important thing you're taking away from your exploration of Matthew Henson's life and his journey? One thing, one single thing, one thing, the most important thing, what would that be? Christopher?
Most important thing is how he went through life and what he did while he was alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about for you?
The most important thing for me is that he put his life in danger.
Mm-hmm. Will, how about for you, the most important thing?
That he never gave up.
He never gave up. Right. Diamond?
That he followed his dreams.
He followed his dreams. Absolutely. Okay. Well then, I think our work here is done. It seems like everybody is taking something of value away from this day. And that's a good thing. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah? Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And make contact with the explorer inside of you. There is an explorer that lives in each and every one of us. May the spirit of Matthew Henson and those that have gone before strengthen us on our journey. May we always have the courage to go for our dreams in spite of all of the obstacles. May we never give up. May we never give up. May we never give up. Amen.